Now, here is the thing you must understand.
Igboho.
These events are almost always distractions designed to take your eyes off the issues. Almost always. But they all also offer you windows into the kind of country that we have become and the kind of country they are still open to turn us into. So this week that was, quite a couple of things happened in that week that was. I don't know when my brother Mike Guinea gave the series of interviews that he gave. I've given up on watching TV in Nigeria because they very rarely give you anything other than censored news. So I really don't like wasting my time watching Nigerian TV. And bar one or two individual journalists who have kept up the very lofty standards with which we grew up with, there's very little credibility left on our television stations, so I rarely watch. But Mike Guinea's interview was everywhere. Light shines brightest in darkness. And he was speaking very rare truths in a place where, in a society of liars, Mike Guinea was speaking truth. So it was very easy for what he had to say to be magnified, and he spoke from his heart. I haven't seen the totality of the interview he gave because I'm privileged to know Mike, and I'm privileged to be able to say he's a friend. And I've heard him say these things publicly, privately. So it was just refreshing that somebody decided to speak, and it had to be someone like Mike. Credibility was speaking. And that is why it's important. Do not partake in their feast, because when you do, you lose your credibility. In a society that is interested in free and fair elections, it is the like of Mike Guinea that is promoted to the highest office for the electoral umpire. But of course, when you have built a society such as ours, and I don't want to jump ahead of myself, I don't want to I won't join issues with you on Arise TV, but here is the thing. We've entered a season where it is critical that when men like Mike Guinea speaks, we're careful to strip his speech of partisanship and understand that he was speaking as a patriot. The unfortunate thing is that there is no nation about which one may be patriotic. We would all have to birth one. But I don't want to get ahead of myself, remember. But I recommend to you that you find the grace to go and listen. If you find the videos, listen to what Mike had to say about the system that has been built, the electoral system, and the purpose to which men have perverted it. The Nigerian judiciary. Yorubas will say that when the fish will rot, it starts from the head. In the case of Nigeria, if there is indeed a head, proverbially, so to speak, it will be the judiciary, because it is not the hope of any man except the human beasts who rule the country. The judiciary more or less does as it is told. So Mike is completely correct. We have more than enough laws, but I don't want to get ahead of myself. I just want to draw your attention to the importance of the historical indictments that Mike delivered in the series of interviews he did. Go and find them, watch them. Um, but the big elephant in the room for me, and again, it is tied to the subject that I'll be discussing this morning, because like I told you already, everything they do at any point in time, are all interrelated because it flows from the same well of impunity. So when you find that something happened in one place that distracts you, you talk about it, but you don't connect them to the central thread, you lose the lessons that are available to be learned. So I have spoken only about Mike's interview in the context of you needing to go teach yourself, but there was one yesterday now. The erections. Oh, did I say erections? Elections. Oh, election, that would be a travesty. The travesty that happened in Abuja yesterday, they call that election. If you ever wanted a window into 2027, if you were so silly as to forget the lessons of 2023, you had that lesson and that window opened for you. A portal was opened into the future in Abuja yesterday. If you ever wanted a portal telling you what to expect, that was it yesterday. That was it. Everything that should not be called an election happened yesterday. Things that have no business in a democracy were seen yesterday. And you know the biggest part of this fraud, the judiciary, we find nothing, absolutely nothing wrong with that. Oh, let me now make it even more interesting for you. Donald Trump and the US Embassy is right there in Abuja. They see all the reports. If you are waiting for Donald Trump to make Tinubu give you free and fair elections in 2027, you don't miss out. Get that into your head pretty quickly. The world is a global village. The old world see us. They see everything. They know everything. They listen. You think it's only Rufai that is listening to Ribadu's conversations. If Rufai can get Ribadu's conversation, you can imagine who else is listening to everybody's conversation. So if you imagine for 1 second that the US is unaware of the fact that Nigeria is not a democracy and they tolerate this because it is in their strategic interest to ignore what sits right on top of their nose, continue to fool yourselves. The point you need to pay attention to is that it is you who is going to save you if anybody is going to save you. What they showed you yesterday is a preview to 2027. Do you understand? Now, like I said, I'm not going to get ahead of myself. But the one thing I don't do is reactions. I know there have been persistent questions asked about the ICE platform. But let me explain. With every passing day, it's becoming more and more obvious to me that we're not dealing with a system that can be engaged in a manner that it can self-regulate itself or self-reform. I've also found that anything done without a focus on a way to end this system, anything done is token in nature. So I've devoted myself to working with others, and we're currently working to build a platform, a robust platform for engagement, because what has happened is that our entire society has been destroyed. It's become dysfunctional. It is also critical that we understand, and I'm doing this before we start, but it is related to my subject this morning. We must understand that the old walls are falling down. Um, we actually do not have a rule-based country any longer. We have full-blown tyranny, but because of mass media and the global the fact that our world has become smaller, what has happened is that our government is obliged to pretend that we're a democracy in order for Western sensibilities to be assuaged, at least the public opinion. And given the fact that we have a pretty substantial diaspora that would rather be living at home if Nigeria were to be a country that was working for its people, this has made it difficult for the world to turn its back on us and pretend that everything is hunky-dory in Nigeria. So because of this, we are still able to do what I am doing. A lot of people have done less and been killed, but I am blessed to have the visibility that you have blessed me with by listening to me even when you didn't think I was completely sane. So where we are today is a situation where you have to look in the mirror if you're looking for who's going to save Nigeria. But the one thing you cannot do is look to the existing system to either self-correct itself or to redeem itself or produce anything good. So this morning, let's take it that that was the week that was. He offered me the opportunity to test my mic. He also afforded me the opportunity to get comfortable in front of a live camera again. So we got a minute to the time, but let's be clear. The ICE platform has become too small and too restrictive for what must be done. We're building something more robust. I'm working with other persons. It may take us a little time, but I am not doing a reaction. The intention is to rebuild the entire wall because the walls are falling. We need to build a nation or a country if we do want one. It's either that or it's going to blow up in everybody's face. So I got a few seconds before 10 o'clock. I'm going to use it and wait for our brethren who are not with us yet to join us. We would also create a way to enable volunteers to join up. So good morning, everybody. It's 10 o'clock now, and it's good to be back with you live. I've missed doing this live. It's much easier, probably even more convenient to pre-record and then push it out because it means that once I'm in the mood, I could just go ahead and do what I need to do. But if I'm doing it to schedule, makes it that. But I enjoy it this way. Let me just put it that way. And this morning, it is critical that we move beyond lamentations and begin to deal with the issues. One of the points I had jotted down with the intention as using that I will use that as my closing is going to become probably the opening now because it is critical that we understand the purpose so that we do not abuse. Ideas rule the world. I've spoken to this multiple times. Ideas rule the world. But it is the ideas that you work on that has the capacity to affect anything. The Nigeria we're living in, this one that has enslaved all of us, was an idea. A very, very bad idea, because it wasn't altruistic. There was absolutely nothing altruistic about the idea of Nigeria. I don't want to spend too much time making detours, but I will deal with what is pertinent to what I need to discuss with you this morning. I did make a post, I believe it was yesterday, begging you to go to my website, delefarotimi.com, download the book, The Imperatives of the Nigerian Revolution. Download it free. The website is not commercialized. I run no adverts there. I gain nothing with your traffic. I'm trying to give you knowledge. Please go download it, because it makes the work I'm doing here that much easier to do. But I'm going to spend time giving you background so that you would have context for what must be done. Nigeria was an idea, a very bad idea, compounding the evil that had been done before its formation. I'm not the one that will teach you about the slave trade. And it didn't begin with the British. It was already part and parcel of the culture in northern Nigeria. They were already exporting slaves to the Arabian Peninsula and the Gulf, the Sudan, through the trans-Saharan trade. And then the British came, and the Portuguese and the Europeans. And they came with the transatlantic slave trade, industrialized, not much different from what the Arabs did. And they traded us for centuries. We were stuck, pretty much like cattle or poultry. When they carried us to the New World, they even had breeding farms. For us, we were cattle. And then when they were done, because the economic condition demanded that they didn't require slave labor any longer, the industrial age came, and they moved away. The same Christianity that was used to explain your enslavement, the same Islam that was used to explain your enslavement, they moved it around, and it became the colonial era. So the British cobbled together disparate persons, over 300 ethnic nations, and say, oh, presto, they've got Nigeria. It wasn't for the benefit of those called Nigerians. It was for the convenience of the British, who came up with the idea of Nigeria. Ideas rule the world. So they created a people, lumped them together, disparate persons, former slavers and the enslaved, former slave stock and the enslavers, locked everybody together. Christians who were converted, Muslims who were Muslims long before the British came to these shores, lumped them together in administrative forms that was convenient for the persons with the idea, the British. Indirect rule it was called. I will not spend too much time telling you the story of the colonial era. Suffice to say that in the 1940s, the Second World War broke out. The Nigerians, other colonial subjects, were recruited into the West African Frontier Force and other colonial forces, and they went and fought the white man's war, particularly in Burma, today's Burma, Malaysia. They fought the white man's war. They bled, they died. They saw white men bled, died. Frontiers of understanding opened up, and the independence struggles started in the seed of all of that. Remember, natives were also taken to England and other colonial parts. They read the same books the white man was reading. Knowledge became more liberalized. The acceptance of colonialism became frayed. The pre-colonial and the post-colonial struggle, the independence struggle started. Eventually, What started out as disparate peoples cobbled together found reasons. They found all kinds of reasons to agree. Coercion in some cases. They found reasons to cobble together a compromise. Remember, before Nigeria was, there was a plebiscite. Northern Cameroon left. He didn't want any part of Nigeria. Almost any other part could have done pretty much the same thing, at least the way they were already cobbled together for administrative convenience. I'm sure the Eastern region could have elected not to be part of Nigeria. I'm very certain Ahmadu Bello could have demanded not to be part of Nigeria. Whether the minorities in northern Nigeria would have accepted to be part of what would have been to them another colonial state, it's another argument entirely. But let's just agree that a compromise was found. For some reason, they moved from persons like Awolowo saying very clearly that there is no nation called Nigeria. He was the one who first defined the fact that Nigeria cannot be spoken of in the terms of the Celts or the English. But Nigeria is just a geographical expression. Those were the founding fathers of Nigeria, and they spoke the truth. Nigeria was a geographical expression. That is all it was, and to a very large extent, that is what it remains, unfortunately. That was the Nigeria that Ahmadu Bello described as the estate of his grandfather. That was the Nigeria, the compromise that was reached. They reached a compromise, even when some people would argue it was Daddy Onyema, some people would argue that Azikiwe himself repeated pretty much the same word at the Igbo World Conference, where he said it was the manifest destiny of the Igbo man to preside over the affairs of Nigeria and that of the black man. Whatever it be, whoever was telling the truth or not telling the truth, the reality is that even at the birth of the country named Nigeria, there were sufficient reasons to have avoided its formation or its birth. The persons who purport to speak for the different parts were seriously unhappy about the idea of a country called Nigeria. But they went back and forth between 1951 up until the point of independence. They had multiple agreements, disagreements. At the end of the day, they came up with a compromise. That compromise began to operate from around 1954, and it was a federal state. The Eastern region ran its own government, had its own embassies. The Western region had its own as well. Whilst the Western and Eastern region were interested in having embassies in the UK, the Northern region was more interested in its embassies in Khartoum and Riyadh, because they were required by its pilgrims heading to Hajj. Each developed along the line of its priorities. And because of this, there was all kind of healthy competition. I am giving you this background so that you would have context for what we must discuss. This is not the most important. If you're wise, pick up the book, like I said, go read. The important thing is that all forms of compromises were reached. And at the end of the day, they said, okay, let's have a parliamentary system, pretty much copying what the British who had colonized us are using and have used for centuries. In addition to that, we have a federal system. So everybody was developing alongside. And then by the time of independence, 1962, based on the agitations that had happened pre-independence, leading to the formation of the Willings Commission on the right of the minorities, because they expressed concern about their survival in a country that they already could see was not even willing to recognize the existence of minorities. It took Awolowo dragging both the eastern and northern minorities to the Lancaster House Conference for them to recognize the need. But the important thing is that in 1962, by a process set up in the Constitution that was agreed pre-independence and at independence, a fourth region was created. It came out of the Western region. It was created based on the constitutional requirements that had been set out ahead of time. It was a rule-based society. There was a plebiscite held in the territory that was to become the Midwestern region. There was a motion taken in the Western House of Assembly, the Regional House of Assembly. It passed by a two-thirds majority. The same thing was taken before the Federal House of Representatives. It passed by a two-thirds majority, and then it was gazetted and the Midwestern region was formed. That compromise collapsed in 1966. You already know the story of the coup of January 1966. A group of young men. A lot of idiots will labor to tell you it was an Igboho coup. Nothing could be farther from the truth. It was a bunch of young men who saw a nation drifting, who acted in a manner that unfortunately provided the excuse for what happened in July. I'm not going to rehash history. Those who have decided to tell edited versions of it can continue telling their edited versions, but it is critical that we agree on the facts so that we may find it a whole lot easier to get into the future that we need to be moving into. Now, if you have a situation where the compromised state has collapsed, what you then begin to have is that a new state began to emerge. That new state was founded on an idea, and it is the idea that a class must be set up higher than the rest. That class is not obliged to obey the laws. The laws do not apply to that class. It started out slowly with the restructuring of Nigeria under the watch of its former colonial masters in the new world order, Bretton Woods Institute, and all of them to reshape the Nigeria that you have today. Its political structures under the watch of the British and increasingly under the watch of the Americans. If you look all around you and you daily groan about your lot in Nigeria, and the world continues to speak of Nigeria as though things are normal with what our government is doing to us, surely you must begin to understand that it is because the government that is not working for you, that victimizes you, the system, because when government runs systems, if the system is not working for the persons in government, they will tweak it to make it work in the manner that they prefer. You have the evidence of that already with your electoral reform bill. So you have a situation where the world is comfortable with everything that is happening in Nigeria. The world is aware of everything that your rulers are doing. The Americans are aware, the British are aware, they are the holders of the stolen funds. But they are happy with what they are seeing. They have no problem whatsoever with what they are seeing. This system, regardless of who has been the president of Nigeria, who has been the governors of your state, has superintended the collapse of the Nigerian state. The educational system does not work. You have over 30 million children. But when you say it does not work, question is, who is it not working for? It's working for a system that prefers that you are stupid He's working for a system that has deliberately weaponized ignorance against you. An ignorant man is doomed to poverty. The system is working for a people who are pretending the expansion of multidimensional poverty in Nigeria. The system is working for those who are profiting off the insecurity. America had wanted boots on ground in Nigeria for decades. Throughout the existence of this country called Nigeria, from its inception, the British and the Americans have wanted boots on ground in our country. Patriots, those who understand the true meaning and the intent, have always fought against it. The Anglo-Nigerian Defense Pact didn't just die because the government said no. It died because some people recognized the loss of sovereignty that would come with it. But successive governments have brought us to a point where Nigerians are justifiably celebrating the loss of sovereignty. But it is because the sovereignty was never there. The Nigeria that was battered after the compromise was killed is one that is working exactly as it is designed based on the idea of its creation. Let me show you something. In every society that is labeled progressive, in every society that is labeled developing, one of the hallmark is the sovereignty, not just of the country, but of the persons, the citizens. It is the sovereignty of the people that strengthens the sovereignty of the nation or the state. When the sovereignty of the people have been taken from them by rulers who are disconnected from the people, the sovereignty of the country itself is undermined. Nigeria today is no longer a sovereign state. The ruiners of Nigeria, for whom the system is working, the people who are benefiting from the system, have taken away the capacity of the Nigerian to effect a peaceful change of governance. At least you cannot change the governance, the ruling class in Nigeria through the electoral process any longer. The right to choose has been removed. If you had any doubt whatsoever, you were shown a mirror, a window rather. A window was opened into the future. You saw 2027 on the street of Abuja yesterday, assuming you ignored the lessons that were shown in the Edo election. If your eyes were blind to the Ondo election, if you didn't see what is going on in Osun State, the impunity that is governing the whole of Osun State right now, the federal overreach, the judicial tyranny and rascality that has been unleashed on Osun State. I'm not a fan of their dancing clown, but the reality is that that is the person the people chose. And today, the same thing Tinubu was complaining about in relation to Obasanjo, the same thing that he turned himself into the hero of the opposition pre-2003 and after, where it became the rallying point for those who thought he was fighting for democracy. The same thing is exactly what he's doing in Osun State today. All the voices that rose in condemnation of Obasanjo, none are able to speak again. For some reason or the other, men are no longer speaking. That is the future. So you've seen very clearly that there is no way you are going to be able to effect any change through the ballot. Any illusion you might have had should be clear. The only way to fight an idea is with another idea. It is always with another idea. In 1993, the people expressed their sovereign will in a manner contrary to the desires of the ruling class. And the ruling class annulled the election. The Oni of the time went into Aso Rock and came out saying reason. That was the foremost Yoruba Oba. He went into Aso Rock and he saw reason. And so did a whole lot of other persons. It took the common man on the street, standing defiantly behind his sovereign will, to galvanize what became known as the June 12 struggle. That it has today been diminished is thanks to the effort of all those who worked against the sovereign will of the people. The lessons and essence of the June 12 struggle was about the sovereign will, the supremacy of the sovereign will of those who are called citizens. We fought the military. Yes, we did. Yes, we did. Today's generation like talking about us as a bunch of cowards. We were no cowards. When you hear of Nadeko this, Nadeko that, yes, the old men talked, but it took young men to act. Young men drove trailers, dumping sand on Third Mainland, enforcing sit at home. Young men bled. Yes, old men went into exile, but young men bled. A lot died. Ekpoma, Ikorodu Road, multiple places across the length and breadth of Nigeria. For years, we fought the military, and then they tricked us. Instead of continuing to insist on the sanctity of our sovereign will, our vote, we allowed the lies of 1999. Obasanjo was sold as a compromise. Oh, Yorubas were agitating. Let's do rotational presidency. We'll zone it to the Yorubas. How do you zone the sovereign power of a collective to a section? So, Obasanjo came. We were shortchanged. Everybody believed that, okay, at least now we fought. Our sovereign will count. I'll fast forward to 2012 because we had a series of fraudulent elections. And then the people finally believed that they expressed their sovereign will in 2012. Or 2011. Was it 2012? Yeah, 2011. And we elected the one that had no shoe. And then came the fraud of 2015, preceded by years of the subjectification of truth by a society that began to subjectify truth. It battered the lies of the fuel subsidy riot, the scam of the fuel subsidy protest. Those who should be thought leaders in society, they stood up, traded their consciences. They knew the truth, but they refused on account of political expediency. They danced, they lied, they walked. Save Nigeria, they said. They saved Nigeria so much that they handed Nigeria to the destroyer of Nigeria, Muhammadu Buhari, 2015. We had fraudulent change, and it led us to 2023. And 2023, I remember saying to all of you very clearly that Peter Obi represented the last opportunity for peaceful transition to normalcy in Nigeria. What did I mean? I wasn't suggesting that Peter Obi was a saint. I'm not. But I was hoping that the supremacy of the people's will will be established by a peaceful transfer of power that is reflexive of the people's will. But the same thing that happened in 1993 happened in 2023. 30 years later, we came back full cycle. The will of the people was again thwarted. But you know what happened? All of you found reasons, different reasons, why we couldn't fight as one. after we had expressed our sovereign will. Partisanship, ethnicity, religion. The religiosity of candidates mattered to the point where it became a thing to have a Muslim ticket. It became a thing to have a Muslim ticket in a country as divided as our own had become by the time. Muslim ticket produced the disaster we have in office today. And then it got to the point where it requires lectures from Trump and the Americans to tell their agents in Nigeria that you can't have Muslim again. And now the same America is quiet, watching as our sovereign right to elect our rulers have been taken away from us. And they are waiting for 2027. Let me explain something to all you all. We have to stop pretending that we don't see what we see. What is happening before you is a new world order taking shape. In that new world order, we are meant to remain the destination for extraction of raw material. They've already achieved that to a very large extent. You have over 140 million people with no skills. Accumulation from years of weaponized ignorance. Illiterates are teaching your children. Bello Galadanchi, very popular skit maker in Nigeria, is a teacher in China. I believe he holds a doctorate degree. But the doctorate degree that he holds is teaching kindergarten. Imagine that. A doctorate degree holder, I believe, is teaching children in kindergarten. Now, can your brain wrap itself around the fact that the Chinese child who is not up to 10 years old is receiving educational instructions from a person who has been trained up to the doctorate degree level? You really have this level of qualification in some of our universities. This is the person teaching in kindergarten. That is the world in which our children have to compete. That's the world they have to compete in. But in our own country, we do not have the capacity to say anything about who rules us. Regardless of how badly they have destroyed the country, we have no say in their emergence or retention. It is even more dangerous when you consider the fact that the justice system sanctions that, protects it, promotes it, because it is equally complicit. Judicial offices have become hereditary. That is the system that we have built. The world is comfortable with what is happening to us. We're about to be railroaded into some new currency, probably administered from France, because it is now the French that appears to be in control of our tax system, whilst our security is in the hand of Americans. What exactly is the government of Nigeria still doing for the Nigerian? Here is where our situation becomes alarming. Everything that I have described as dysfunctional are actually functional. It is working exactly the way the system is designed to work. I can keep making these videos from now till kingdom come. The system has no problem with that. Those who took steps Let's see how the system has dealt with them. Without carrying gun, by merely protesting against this system, unknown number of Nigerians were killed at Lekki toll gate, and the Nigerian state denied them. Even though, I repeat it, Sanwo-Olu paid 100 million in cash in compensation to the injured and the families of the dead. But the Nigerian state continues to deny it. But I'm saying to you, speaking Dogon Turenchi here, we don't change anything. So let's talk about those who protested and who are known, the Showores of this world, the Peter Aka of this world. What has the state done to them? Tear gas them, sent some to prison, slammed Showore in detention. What did he ever do other than to protest? What? What is it that these persons ever did other than to protest? They never bore harm against Nigeria. Persons bearing harm against Nigeria, Dan Keremi killed an ACP, wore his uniform to what they call the peace meeting, where they had instructed the government officials to ensure that they do not bring any policeman in uniform. Dan Keremi wore the uniform of the Assistant Commissioner of Police. Dan Keremi is walking free. There are multiple bandits, they call them terrorists, who have borne harms against the Nigerian state. They're walking free. The Nigerian state is paying them. The Nigerian state is denying the criminality of criminals who are busy coming on live TikTok to show that, look, oh, your government is lying about us not having hostages. Look at our hostages. That is where we are. And this is where the government wants us to be. Bayo Ononuga told all of us clearly, it was on national TV, they phoned terrorists to tell them to release those who have been captured by terrorists. We were all there together. We saw it when some people were caught and they said they were Fulani terrorists caught. And they claimed they were vigilantes armed by the Office of the National Security Advisor. This is what we're seeing everywhere we turn. The collapse of the day, of the Nigerian state collapsing. And all we do is we lament. What did Nnamdi Kanu do? He moved beyond talking. That was all he ever did. Nobody has him anywhere leading the kidnap of citizens. No one has him anywhere demanding ransom, killing people, raping. These are things Fulani terrorists are doing on a daily basis, and the Nigerian state is completely blind to them. I'm not suggesting that if Kanu had done something for which, but the only thing you said, incitement to terrorism. What about the persons who are committing actual acts of terrorism and the state is completely blind to them? So what you are having today is a situation where we have built a state that is not working for the victims. It is working only for its beneficiaries. The ruling class and the foreign powers is not working for the Nigerian. Sunday Igboho, what did he say or do that justified the years of exile, the invasion of his home and the killing that took place in his home? Why is it that it is those who demand that Nigeria should be better to treat its people the same that are labeled terrorists and routinely killed and hounded into exile? But terrorists are mollycoddled, paid salaries. Government is going to court to enter nolle prosequi on behalf of terrorists. The reality is this. We've come to a point in Nigeria where we have to admit to ourselves the road to peaceful change is being blocked on a daily basis. The Nigerian state is making it impossible to have a peaceful change or to have a peaceful revolution in Nigeria. But the character of a revolution is entirely in the hand of the revolutionaries. And this is one of the things I need us to speak to before we close. I titled my lecture, Birthing the Unborn Nation. What do I mean? I've been calling myself a patriot of the unborn nation for quite some time. And that is because there is no Nigerian nation in the sense of nations. There is a Nigerian state. The Nigerian state is very strong. Forget the madness it allows within its territory. Those you call terrorists are partners with the Nigerian state. Their job is sanctioned by the Nigerian state. Let me just put it that way. To a large extent, they were even recruited by the Nigerian state. You have more than enough evidence of the complicity of the Nigerian state at multiple levels in what we call terrorism today. So they are not going to come and chase away any one of those because those people work for them. So let us be clear about one thing. The Nigerian state as it is very strong. It is probably at the strongest it has ever been. It is the Nigerian victims that have been reduced in their capacity to respond to the Nigerian state, which has become so powerful that it has taken away every right that once inured with the Nigerian. The Nigerian state has become so powerful that it has taken away any right or any power that any one of us might possibly have to effect a change of government in the prescribed fashion. The Nigerian state is so powerful that it has captured the judiciary, and the judiciary no longer offers any hope to the common man. When you look at the objective reality of the Nigerian state, what you find very quickly is that the victims of Nigeria have only two things lined up in front of them. We are either going to find the grace to allow another idea to birth a new Nigeria, a new Nigeria where ethnicity and religion is minimized and citizenship is established. If the idea of feudalism, if the idea of neocolonialism has battered the Nigeria in which we are, where all of us are complaining and lamenting, the idea of a Nigeria that works for all of us, however difficult it might appear in attainment, the idea of a Nigeria that works for all of us, that is the only idea that can liberate us. Without us working together to be free of this system, it is in our division that will continue to strengthen the bond of slavery. Let me be very clear. Ideas rule the world. If I'm saying that we should build a system based on the idea of citizenship, it doesn't come just because I wish it. And it wouldn't come simply because I have articulated it. It will only happen when all of us, in recognition of what needs to be done, all of us, or at least a critical mass of us, recognizing what needs to be done, we must work together based on common ideas. And then organize ourselves. And the organization to which I speak, we must organize on university campuses. We must organize on every campus of higher learning in this country. We must organize in churches. We must organize in markets. We must organize in mosques. We must organize in town unions. We must organize ourselves, even within the cells that have been infiltrated by the system. I know as a fact that today in Lagos State, and if not the whole of Nigeria, a system is being steadily built where you need to belong to the APC before you may assess any level of attention from government. We are not one. I'm not suggesting that we are one, but we must become one if we are going to ever be free. In our divisions, our capacity to fight our enslavers is diminished. We need to deliberately and consciously build around the idea of a Nigeria that works for all of us, where we, all of us, become one as citizens. Let me be clear about something. An idea has ruled Nigeria for all these years. I don't expect that idea to walk away, or those of you who have become acculturated to the idea to easily give up what is easy. We cannot be a people born defeated who do not have the capacity to think our way out of our problems. We're human. And Nigerians are some of the most intelligent human beings I have come across. We can bemoan our situation. We can lament. But a generation must arise that finds common purpose. The duty for those of us who believe there is a better pathway is to articulate the better pathway, set down the common interest and purpose, and work even as evangelists, zealots.